The Animals' menacing sound propelled them to international fame during the British invasion. In 1964, House of the Rising Sun took the band to #1, knocking the Beatles out of the top spot. It should have made everything easier from that point on, but it didn't. According to Eric Burdon, the song took 10 minutes to record and cost less than $10. There was a big push to get it out as a single right away, but when they went to press the 45, they couldn't fit all their names on the label. So their manager Mike Jeffrey came to them with a dilemma and suggested they use Alan Price's name. They would work out the legalities later. Just happy to get their music career underway, they all agreed. Eric describes it as the most pivotal, disastrous moment of my life. With the stroke of a pen, the rest of the Animals were screwed. After relentless touring and a string of hits, Eric describes the first big worldwide royalty check in Alan's name. But instead of sorting out the legalities as promised, he takes the money and runs. He quit the band and disappeared, leaving the rest of them without a dime. While House of the Rising Sun wasn't the financial windfall it should have been, it did launch Eric Burdon and the Animals onto the worldwide stage. What came next was up to them. However, a series of setbacks unfold that Eric outlines in his memoir, Don't Let Me Be Misunderstood, while he finds himself in the midst of one iconic moment after another as he attempts to regain momentum. It all leads up to a crash collision with Jim Morrison, who has risen to the top but is on a completely different trajectory. The intense showdown foreshadowed the paths both men were already on and the legacies they would leave behind.
There is a house in New Orleans.
Early on in the Animals' career, manager Mike Jeffrey came to them with another proposal, often referred to as creative accounting, in an effort to avoid some of the hefty taxes incurred in the UK and US. He said most successful bands, including the Beatles, kept their earnings in the Bahamas so as not to be pillaged by the government. Once again, they signed on the dotted line, not understanding what they were agreeing to. In 1966, after a long string of chemical-induced experiences left Eric Burdon feeling unfulfilled, he disbanded the Animals. When they went to try and get their money out of the Bahamas account, there was no money. Millions of dollars were gone. Chas Chandler even flew to the Bahamas to find out what was going on, and the bank's building didn't even exist anymore. Their manager Mike Jeffrey was long gone to Spain. And after all their success, they were left penniless. Eric says they didn't even have the money to hire an attorney to try and right the wrong. Embarrassed by their naivete, they couldn't go back to Newcastle with nothing to show. Instead, Eric decides to fly to California to figure out what to do with his life and career. There must be a way to rebuild what was lost that once seemed like a dream come true. Surely a new start in a burgeoning music scene could hold the clue to where to begin.
Whose intentions are good. Oh Lord, please don't let me be misunderstood.
He initially gets off on the right foot. He scored a new record deal with MGM and forms Eric Burdon and the New Animals. Eric seems to be in his element once again as they tour, playing venues such as the Troubadour and Fillmore West. It's here where Eric Burdon first meets Jim Morrison when they're both playing in San Francisco. They hit it off and become friends, talking about music and films they both love. Eric credits Jim for advising him to move to Southern California instead of Northern. LA's the place, man, Jim tells him as they hang out backstage amongst a bunch of unusual characters. Eric describes Jim at this point. He was looking great, and I figured he was going to be the next Marlon Brando. As I got to know Jim over the next few months, I realized that he was just so out of control and that he could never muster the discipline to do something as demanding as completing a film. He was going down and wanted to shout it to the world like some courageous clown. But Eric takes Jim's advice, and before long he moves into Laurel Canyon and is overjoyed to be living amongst neighbors such as Joni Mitchell, Frank Zappa, Cass Elliot, Canned Heat, John Mayall, and Jim Morrison, as well as others. They even recorded 2 tracks with Frank Zappa, including All Night Long and The Other Side of Life. He describes Frank as brilliant and a cultural maverick. But before long, he falls back into his LSD-immersed world. He spends time riding motorcycles down Mulholland Drive, completely in awe of the beautiful scenery. It was a magical time in 1967. His new perspective also results in his music changing from a blues focus to psychedelic odysseys. One song was inspired by a night in San Francisco at the Fillmore when Janis Joplin told him to come to the side door and she'd let him in. Once there, she slipped him a red tab. "Take it, it's hot off the press. Owsley's, you'll love it." As they make their way past the Hells Angels, she advises him, "Don't mess with them or they'll kill you." He meets the Grateful Dead and Big Brother and the Holding Company before running in to Jim Morrison. Jim approaches Eric with a cold beer as they chat when they are interrupted by Bill Graham, who informs Janis that she's up. "You got 8 minutes, babe. Let's go." Eric and Jim stand on the side of the stage and watch Janis perform in a see-through mini dress and kitten heels, bathed in white light. Eric's thoughts on Janis were that if you didn't see her live, then you never really got to experience her full force of musical genius. That night, under a full moon amongst legends, he comes up with the song San Francisco Nights, which made it a hit for Eric Burdon and the Animals at number 7.
Mine's due to on a warm San Francisco night.
This should have been the beginning of his rise back to the top, but in between a long stretch of touring, partying, and psychedelic trips, a darkness was emerging in Southern California that no one saw coming. On a hot August morning in 1969, Eric was visiting a friend when he overheard a news report over the radio that several people were murdered in a nearby house, including actress Sharon Tate. He says for many people, this truly marked the end of the hippie era. The following day, there were more grisly murders. Fear gripped the Los Angeles area, and the open-door policy in Laurel Canyon soon faded as people locked their doors and many bought guns as they waited for the killers to be caught. Eric had a gun as well. He said the news reported that hundreds of shotguns were sold in a single week. Eventually, they caught Manson and his family. Meanwhile, pot and LSD had turned into speed and heroin. As LA changes, so does Eric. He finds himself isolated in his head, feeling like he is losing it. And before long, he disbands Eric Burdon and the New Animals. Once again, he is right where he started, looking for momentum to get back to the top. He is soon approached by Jerry Goldstein and Steve Gold, who have merchandising deals with Jimi Hendrix and Sly Stone. They present him with a plan to make his comeback. They want him to re-sign with MGM, which can help launch a movie career at some point, and join forces with a band out of the San Fernando Valley called Night Shift. They take the core members of Night Shift as Eric leads the group, now renamed to Eric Burdon and War. They soon begin rehearsing for their first tour. At one point, Gold insists that in order to fully gel as a band, they should all move in together into a mansion in Bel Air. It didn't take much time at all for the War Mansion, as it was referred to turn into Party Central. The Los Angeles music scene became fixtures, including Jimi Hendrix and Jim Morrison. Morrison would often be found passed out in a hallway with several hippie women. He is at this point unraveling as a full-blown alcoholic and inciting fights for no reason. The sometimes sensitive, insightful side is often taken over by chaotic episodes. Jim's demons often get the best of him. Eric calls him a glutton for punishment. There was a white grand piano in the house that Lonnie Jordan would pound on to let people know he arrived. One day when Jim was in the garden and Lonnie did this, it infuriated Jim. He barged into the house and got right up in Lonnie's face. What the hell are you doing? I'm just messing around, man. Jim relentlessly berated him until Lonnie, fed up, punches him in the face. But that didn't deter Morrison. He then turns his ire to Eric Burdon. He starts picking on him as they go back and forth, leaving Eric fuming. He manages to taper down his anger for the moment, but this sets the stage for the showdown. Eric Burdon was feeling the pressure. If the latest ensemble failed to create something that connected, it could mark the end of his commercial relevance. The stakes were high, compounded by his ongoing struggle with personal demons and the need to prove he still had something vital that matched the Animals era. They spent long hours in the studio, stretching songs into extended jams, searching for a feel that could translate into a sound with real weight. When they weren't recording, Burdon was back at the mansion, working through the business side, planning, negotiating, trying to shape an album that worked creatively and commercially. One morning, Eric wakes up in the War Mansion, which had been taken over by Jim and his hippie entourage, passed out all over the floors, as Eric tries to make his way past the bodies into his office where he needed to get to work. His temper gets the best of him, and his recent issue with Jim ignites him at the disrespect, and he goes and grabs a .44 Magnum. Jim, half asleep, laying slumped up against the wall, opens his eyes and sees Eric holding the gun as everyone begins to wake up. He had one bullet in the chamber as he walked across the marble floor, stepping over two figures. Jim says to a girl he's with, "Nah, he's only joking." Eric points at the chandelier and pulls the trigger, spinning the barrel. Jim smiles and says to the girls, "See, he ain't gonna do it." He pulls the trigger again. But as the anger boiled over, he pulls the hammer back and once again pulls the trigger. The chandelier glass came crashing down around Jim and his hippie entourage. Glass rained down on everyone, including Eric. It was a shocking moment when everything came to a head. Every ripoff, every disappointment, every setback when Eric Burdon could take no more. Was he dreaming? Maybe he was dreaming he was the star in a Hollywood movie. Or maybe he was just an overfed, long-haired leaping gnome from Newcastle. But as fate would have it, Eric never did see Jim Morrison again. The next thing he heard, Jim had moved to Paris, and soon his date with destiny unfolded. Within months, he was dead, found in a bathtub at age 27. It was a tragic end to one of the most electrifying figures of his era, a singular talent whose intensity was unmatched. Morrison's legacy would be permanently shaped by both his brilliance and his excess. But while Morrison's story was reaching its end, Eric Burdon's was entering a new phase. On his birthday, they released Eric Burdon Declares War. The album's lead single, Spill the Wine, became a top 10 hit, marking a dramatic reinvention and a long-awaited resurgence.
I was in a Hollywood movie, that I was the star of the movie.
The song brought him a level of success he hadn't known in years. Its origin was almost accidental, a bottle of wine knocked over in the studio during one of the extended jam sessions. But the result felt anything but random. The latest hit was a moment of quiet revenge against the shoddy businessmen and broken alliances that had defined the past. Eric Burdon was back on top, even if it was a brief moment, standing high on a mountaintop, standing naked to the world. Thank you for watching. To see the extended version with Eric Burdon's interviews and more music, be sure to join the Patreon where you can support my work and get even more of this story and others. Ad-free versions are available on YouTube and Patreon. Have a freewheeling day. Cheers!